Star Trek Picard finally gave us an on-screen look at the Star Trek universe after the events of the movie Star Trek Nemesis and the destruction of Romulus, the homeworld of Star Trek's implacable antagonists, the Romulans, as shown in the Star Trek 2009 movie. Until the Picard series, what happens after the destruction of Romulus has been left to novels and games such as Star Trek Online. Star Trek Online takes place in a time period not long after Star Trek Picard, and it features several gameplay missions or episodes that introduce the player to the state of the galaxy, such as who is in control of the Romulan factions, the causes of a mild war between the Klingons and the Federation, the re-emergence of the Borg, the Dominion, and even the Delta Quadrant factions. Star Trek Picard did not focus much at all on the general state of the Alpha and Beta Quadrants, not even a briefing or synopsis about any of this is offered. Instead, it dives right into the character's story and touches on the state of the galaxy only when absolutely necessary. I will not pretend to be unbiased here, as I feel that this was a weakness of the series. In Star Trek The Next Generation, and the original series as well, usually in the Enterprise briefing room, one of the foundations of the story has always included some dialogue that informs the viewer about the general state of the situation. Little bits of information that built the world, such as in the TNG episode The Neutral Zone, when it is stated the Romulans haven't made any contact in 50 years, or the state of the Klingon High Council in the episode Sins of the Father, or that the Remans are a second-class species in the Romulan Empire, as told in Star Trek Nemesis. No, in Star Trek Picard, things just sorta happen without context or background information. So let's have that briefing now and fill in some of these gaps. The common questions I hear are, did the Romulan Star Empire survive? If it didn't, then what is the nature of the new Romulan state? And who are the people in charge of it? What happened to the feared Romulan fleet? What are the Klingons up to while all this is going on? How does the Federation feel about the Romulans having access to Borg technology? And could the Federation stop them if the Romulans successfully make use of it? What deal with the Romulans did the Federation actually make over the artifact, which is the abandoned Borg cube? Why is it called an artifact anyway? Why isn't it called the derelict? A Borg cube is certainly not some ancient forgotten relic. None of these questions are answered, and I'm very skeptical that they ever will be. I get the impression that the creators of Star Trek from 2009 to present avoid the substance of deep and detailed world building like the plague. The writers for Star Trek Online, however, are not so timid. For example, Sela, the half-Romulan daughter of Tasha Yar, is in control of what remains of the Romulan Star Empire and has declared herself Empress. This is interesting since she is a reoccurring antagonist in Star Trek The Next Generation, as well as one of the more interesting antagonists in the game. While this over-the-top chap, Colonel Hakiv, controls the Tal Shiar, and Datan, once an apprentice to Spock as part of the reunification movement, is the leader of the new Romulan Republic, a less authoritarian Romulan faction, more open to cooperation with the Federation and the Klingons. This is the faction the Romulan players are part of. They are in active conflict with the Tal Shiar and the Romulan Star Empire. I don't really care about spoiling Star Trek Picard, but be warned, there are Star Trek Online game spoilers ahead. The game goes into the cause for the supernova that destroys Romulus and Remus. I guess J.J. Abrams and Alex Kurtzman, producers of the Star Trek 2009 movie, thought that if George Lucas can get away with destroying whole planets in Star Wars, it would be really cool to have them blow up in Star Trek too. So in the Prime timeline, Romulus is destroyed as a result of a supernova. The supernova was said in the movie to threaten the galaxy. Slight rant here. Most sci-fi fans know that a supernova would barely threaten anything within several light years, much less an entire galaxy. And even if the supernova was a threat to several systems, there would be plenty of time to evacuate before the wavefront hit them. Star Trek in 2009 began an era when viewers are expected to disengage their analytical minds and just enjoy the show, which is one of the reasons the fan base is divided, as Star Trek used to be something that engaged and inspired the analytical mind, and fans like myself aren't getting our intellectual fix from Star Trek anymore, but I digress. Star Trek Online, with some novels and comics, addresses this problem. The supernova occurs in the Hoba system. The cause isn't natural, but deliberate, and occurs through subspace, which allows the wavefront to travel faster than light and truly threaten a good bit of the galaxy. The players are taken through a series of playable episodes that unravel the mystery of why the supernova occurred. It turns out that the Iconians, once thought to be extinct, an advanced and ancient race, are still around and involved. This is great because the Iconians play heavily into one of the best Star Trek TNG episodes, Contagion. The same Romulan commander that appears in that episode, Taris, continued her pursuit to acquire Iconian technology. One of her subordinates, Hakiv, manages to make contact with the few surviving Iconians through a rather nasty servitor race called the Alachi. The Iconians trick Taris and manipulate Hakiv into using a device that is supposed to bring the Iconians into the Beta Quadrant, but instead it triggers the Hobus star to go nova. The Iconians are essentially the main antagonists in Star Trek Online that are causing all the chaos in the galaxy behind the scenes. The chaos, at least, seems to be something that Picard and Star Trek Online have in common. I mean, there's war with the Klingons, the Borg have returned, Species 8472 seem to have infiltrated both the Federation and the Klingon Empire. There are just all kinds of problems that are going on. The essence of Star Trek is really hard to duplicate in a game. A game works with conflict, and the easiest forms of conflict are wars, battles, and destruction. I suspect that someone on the Star Trek Picard production team has been playing Star Trek Online. It has ground action that seems to be a direct inspiration from that game. So many of the characters, especially 7 of 9, seem to be more like video game characters. For the same reasons Star Trek games don't work quite as well as Star Wars games, video game-like characters are a bit too lowbrow for most intellectual Star Trek fans, and they don't quite fit with the Star Trek universe. Now, I've barely dipped into many plotlines in Star Trek Online, which leads me to the conclusion that even from the days of its first launch, Star Trek Online is very well fleshed out. Is it believable? No way. But Star Trek Online is no less believable than anything in Picard or Discovery, except that it's consistent and takes great care not to break any established canon. In Star Trek Online, the Federation is as optimistic as ever, and Starfleet flaunts its many varieties of starships. The Klingons are fun and likable, eventually coming around to peace with the other powers so they can team up and kick some Borg or Iconian butt. The Romulans are multifaceted and as complex as ever, and there are many integrated elements with canon and the established Star Trek universe. Although there are elements of Star Trek Online that I don't think are true to Star Trek, I feel my headcanon can kind of work with it. If I were given this choice, to watch a new Star Trek series based on the universe shown in Star Trek Online, or the universe shown in Star Trek Picard, which would I rather watch? Based on the general mood of Picard and what we've seen so far, I would choose to watch a series based on the Star Trek Online universe, hands down. That's all I had to say about this topic. I had to make this video, but I'm now resuming work on the thread from before, the secret abilities of the D'Deridix Warbird. Also, by now you can join as a member of the channel, which will give you access to a lot of work-in-progress material, and more, which I often have a lot of when I'm working on a video with a lot of CG involved. Subscribe and stay tuned for that content. Until next time, space friends.